Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 24th of October, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So apologies for missing last Friday's episode. Unfortunately had a headache and wasn't really feeling up to doing a refuel, so I figured I'd give it a miss. Just for future reference, whenever that happens, I'll send a message out in the Discord channel, in the announcements channel there, and I'll tag everyone. So if you are not in the Discord channel yet, be sure to join there. Even if you don't want to participate, you just mute everything. It's just there so you basically know when there's not going to be an episode. It's a rare thing, but it does happen from time to time. But anyway, that means that this episode, there's a lot to go through. It's basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a little bit of Monday, right? It's Monday night for me. So let's start off with a tweet from Brian Armstrong. So this follows all the drama that happened last week and a bit over the weekend as well around SBF from FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, and how he's been pushing this new bill, this new kind of regulatory bill in the US, and yeah, we all know the story behind that. Now, Brian came out with his tweet where he said, "Worth stating for the record, DeFi should be protected in any legislation that seeks to regulate centralized exchanges and custodians. Thanks to these two senators here for trying to get this right." So this is Senator Debbie Stabenow, hopefully I said that right, and Senator John Boozman here. So they are apparently, from what I can tell from this tweet, trying to make sure that this legislation does not adversely impact DeFi, does not bring any kind of negative externalities to DeFi, which is obviously very, very cool. I think Coinbase has a colored history, a very colored history, and also I think there's varied opinions around what Coinbase is and isn't within the crypto ecosystem. I think over the past couple years, I've grown to appreciate Coinbase a lot more than I had in the past. They definitely do, I think, a lot for crypto, particularly in the background that you may not be privy to. And I don't think anyone can deny that Brian Armstrong is actually in crypto for the crypto mission. He's not in crypto just to make money. He's not a profit maximalist like someone like SBF. He actually believes in the mission. And I think Coinbase's actions over the past couple of years especially have definitely kind of approved that. Now, there has been some mishaps along the way. There was that thing with that chain analysis company, I think, that they bought out or something, and there were, that was caught doing dodgy things and stuff like that. There were some mishaps along the way, but overall, I think Coinbase has been doing a lot of amazing stuff for this ecosystem. So it's great to have someone like Brian on board. I mean, obviously, he's the co-founder and CEO of Coinbase, but just generally having him on board is a very good signal for our ecosystem, because someone like Brian has a lot of connections outside of crypto, right? He has a lot of access outside of crypto, and we want someone like him talking to politicians, not someone like SBF. And I think it's a great point for him saying, DeFi should be protected from any legislation that seeks to regulate centralized exchanges and custodians, because the whole point of DeFi is for it to be decentralized, self-custodial, very different to the CeFi model of custodial. And I've gone through this on the Refuel before. I think a long time ago, I explained this whole thing, but just to rehash this here, the main difference when it really comes down to it between DeFi and CeFi is custody. And the reason why CeFi platforms and TradFi banks and financial institutions are regulated so heavily is because they custody the assets, right? So when you have a non-custodial system where, for example, a fully decentralized non-custodial system like Uniswap, then what are you regulating, right? Like you don't need to regulate anything because the entire system is decentralized. There's no central controller. Anyone putting money in is doing so on their own volition, and they have the control over what happens with that money in that platform. They are obviously aware, or they should be aware, that once they put their money into a liquidity pool, that those assets are going to be used and traded with other people, but it's not going to be a centrally controlled thing, and at any time they can pull their assets out. And obviously, given the way Uniswap works, it's never going to be the same as when they put the assets in, right? There'll be an imbalance depending on the price of the assets and things like that, as opposed to when they first put it in. But yeah, it's done non-custodial. There's no central, like Hayden Adams from Uniswap is not in control of those assets, right? Whereas with CeFi, as soon as you put any money into any CeFi platform, they have total 100% control over your assets. And we've seen the fallout of this recently, right? With Celsius, for example, as a big name one, where people couldn't withdraw their funds because those funds do not belong to you anymore. They belong to you in, maybe, I guess, like on some form of IOU or some form of contract or some terms you have with the exchange. But in reality, that's not really worth much, right? And we look at something like MT Gox. There's been this whole process to make people kind of whole from that debacle. It's been going on for a very long time now. It's been like, what? MT Gox collapsed in 2014. It's 2022, and it still hasn't settled. It has been 8 years so far. So even if you do get your money back eventually or get some of it back eventually, it takes a long time, right? Because it has to go through the entire legal process. I mean, it's a mess, right? So instead of doing that, instead of risking that for a little bit of yield, like I never understood people who would put their money on these centralized platforms, put lots of money on there to get what, 5-10% yield? Okay, yeah, that's a really great yield, but what risk are you taking? You're taking 100% kind of custodial risk there, 100% risk on your assets. So if you put $10,000 in and you're earning 5-10% a year, right? It's a yearly, say you're earning 10% a year, okay, cool, you earn like $1,000 and on a $10,000 deposit, that's awesome. But the risk is 100% of your capital, right? Whereas obviously smart contracts aren't immune to this. Even if they're decentralized, they can have bugs in them, right? They can be hacked and things like that. But the risk in my mind is still lower than putting it in a CeFi platform in terms of and it's not custodial risk, right? So you just got to weigh up the risk. I always talk about risk, but I think it always comes back to that. But that is at the heart of why regulations exist for CeFi and TradFi, is because of that custodial nature. So in a non-custodial world, and a decentralized world, what regulations would you even impose? Well, you can't really impose any that makes sense, right? And that's why people are angry about this bill, is because a lot of it doesn't make sense. As I explained last week, there are provisions in it originally, or I don't know if they're still in it, that would require every single trade that routes through Uniswap to be reported to some entity or something like that. That doesn't make any sense, right? So, because there's no one tracking that stuff. I mean, you're tracking it for data analytics purposes, but you're not tracking it for anything else, right? There's no central body that tracks that. There's no central body that does AML and KYC on Uniswap, because that just doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense for it to exist, right? Whereas with CeFi, obviously, it does. Like, you want to do KYC, you want to know who's using your platform, even though I really think that KYC is very dangerous, because it creates like a honeypot of people's information. But there are ways to do KYC that don't do that, and we're progressing towards that with things like zero knowledge proofs, as I've talked about before, with the Sysmo project, for example, where you could have like a badge that basically proves who you say you are, and then you expose that badge to different services to KYC. Like Gitcoin Passport's doing this as well. There's a few services doing this, but it means you don't give your data over to this massive kind of database that can be hacked and leaked, and your information just gets shared everywhere. I think that's an important point to realize there. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave that at that, because I've got a bunch of other things I want to get through. But great to see Brian on our side here. All right, so there's actually a lot of core development updates to get through today, which is awesome, but I'm going to try and get through them as fast as I can. So Tim Byko was in a little thread here. And this thread this tweet goes back to February of this year, where Trent said, "Just going to preempt everyone in 6 months. Danksharding needs a different name that describes what it does. Come on, people, we can do this." And then Banteg replied, actually, like a day ago, saying people couldn't even invent a sticky name for NFTs in 3 years. It's hopeless. But then Tim replies and says, "Blobs space," as the meme for Danksharding. And then he replied again to another person, where he said, "The blobs will be dank once we only sample them rather than fully download each one," which is referencing data availability sampling. And then he goes, "This is the definition of full dank sharding relative to EIP 4844. Now, there's two things here. I want to focus on explaining the difference between proto dank sharding and full dank sharding again, using this kind of meme, and the meme itself. So blob space is actually pretty funny, because block space already exists as a term. We use it all the time. Everyone says it. Blob space basically references the space of a block that is dedicated to blobs, which is what proto dank sharding is, right? This blob type transaction where it expires after a month, and then you have a cheaper core data storage for layer 2s, right? You guys know this. I've been through this a million times, but in the context of like defining the difference between full dank sharding and proto dank sharding, well, full dank sharding will have blobs, but they will be sampling them rather than fully downloading each one, which means that validators on the network or people that want that data To verify it, use what's called data availability sampling, which from my understanding, I'm hoping I'm getting this right because it gets quite technical here, and this stuff is still like very much in research phase. But what it means is that you can sample a portion of the data, right? Like a portion of the data, and have guarantees. I don't think the guarantee is 100%, but it's like as close to 100% as you can get, that data exists. And that's why it's called data availability sampling, because you're sampling a portion of the data to know if it's available. And if you do that, that means you can validate it, you can attest to it, you can do all the good stuff with it. Now, that brings a much more scalable system because now it doesn't require every validator to check everything, check the entire data. It only requires a sample of it to be checked, right? And that's why with proto danksharding, it expires after a month because storing that for too long would put more requirements on full nodes, hardware requirements on full nodes, and we get less full nodes, and it would compromise on the decentralization of Ethereum. Well, that's a lot there. Hopefully you can ingest it. But I think if you were to look into this more, the things to Google would be data availability sampling, Ethereum, like just Google that term. And then obviously go to the EIP4844.com website, and then search danksharding as well and it'll come up with results. Those things will give you better explainers, I guess, a more detailed explainers than what I can. But the reason why full danksharding is going to take a while is because of that data availability sampling thing, which is quite, it's not an easy thing to do. No one's kind of figured it out, so to speak, but there are different ideas of what implementations could look like, but it's all trade-offs again. I mean, everything's trade-offs, right? But it's all trade-offs again, and that's what we're kind of looking at. So yeah, you can go Google those terms to get more information about that. Next core development update, or at least a commentary on something here. So Masari put out a tweet about the OFAC censorship and about the MEV boost blocks being censored and OFAC compliant validators and all that sorts of stuff, where they said Ethereum validators have increasingly chosen to use OFAC compliant relays. The number of OFAC complying validators has increased to 52%, presenting a credible threat to Ethereum's neutrality and censorship resistance. But then Tony here, who I've mentioned on the refill before, he's been working on analytics around MEV, quote tweeted this and said, "It's not the validators. Many validators using MEV boost would propose an uncensored block as long as it outbids the censored block. This is important not to mix up." And this is exactly what I've been talking about as well, where I said that a relay is not a validator. A relay is a block builder. It does not validate anything. It sends the block, the bundles and the blocks that it sends the blocks that it builds to validators, but it is not a validator. And this was important in the context of attestation level censorship, because a relay cannot attest to blocks because it is not a validator, right? And to Tony's point here, where he says many validators using MEV boost would propose an uncensored block as long as it outbids the censored block. At the end of the day, guys, the validators themselves, the reason why they're using flashbots is because it's more profitable for them to use flashbots instead of one of the other relays. Most of them, or if not all of them, probably don't give a shit about censoring anything, right? They don't even care about the OFAC sanctions, but they're just going with what's most profitable. And that's actually a double-edged sword. They don't care about it in either sense. They don't care if they're censoring or not censoring. To them, it doesn't make a difference. All that matters to them is the profit. And that is what we're designing the, censorship resistant techniques for, is those validators in general being profit maximals. We can't, as I've said before, we can't expect most validators to not be profit maximals. I expect most to be that. But it's on us to build better resilient systems, better censorship resistant systems to live in that world, because we don't live in the fully altruistic world where 100% of stakers will be happy with the block rewards and the proposer rewards and the sync committee rewards and the normal fee revenue. No, that's not going to happen, especially when the yield can go up so much from and the potential rewards go up so much from MEV related stuff. Now, how do we fix that? Well, all the things I've mentioned before: PBS, CR lists, bringing eliminating as much MEV as possible. All that sort of stuff goes a long way to fixing these issues of censorship. But the point needs to be made a lot on this, I think, that validators themselves, most of them, or if not all of them, do not give a shit about any of this, right? And at the same time, the only reason why so many blocks are quote-unquote OFAC compliant is because of that one relay, because of flashbots. Without the flashbots relay, and if everyone was just using an uncensored relay, for example, it would be 0%. The validators wouldn't be censoring on their own. At least, I think over 90% of them wouldn't be censoring on their own, because we've already seen that in the US, right, or even the biggest, most regulated entities such as Coinbase are not are not censoring at the validator level. Like they've got their validators, right? They could be using MEV boost relays or not, but at the validator level, they're not censoring. They're not censoring for inclusion, and they're not censoring for attestation. Inclusion's a bit harder to track, but as far as we know, they're not doing it. I haven't seen any evidence of them doing this. So really, it just comes down to which parties want to censor or want to overcomply in order to protect themselves and which ones don't. But the fix here is not to ask that question at all, and not to even think about that. The fix is to make it impossible for people to censor, or to make it extremely hard or unprofitable for that to happen. And all those solutions that are being worked on are working towards that goal. So yeah, that's enough on that one. I've spoken about that a lot lately. Next up, we have some updates of the Ultrasound.money website. So Alex here, who works on the Ultrasound.money website, put out a tweet saying, whatever number of iterations you think we make on widgets before we release them, it's more. New version of Ultrasound.money is now live. So reorder of the widgets on the website, streaks updated for new deflationary block methodology, and added timeframes for gas widgets. So it's been pretty exciting to be on the Ultrasound.money website lately because of those higher gas prices leading to a almost deflationary ETH since merge. So we got to, I think, plus 0.01% since merge, and you can see it's come down a lot. Right here, over the last 30 days, I believe we're still net deflationary, which is very cool. And the supply change, I mean, this is insane. We've only net issued, including the burn, 2,100 ETH since the merge, which happened 39 days ago. Under proof of work, that would have been 466,000 ETH, guys. Like, that's just absolutely insane. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is going to play out eventually in the price. Like, I'm not going to guarantee that, obviously, but I strongly believe it will, and there's no guarantees. But, it all logically makes sense to me. Anyway, let's check out some of these updates. So one of the updates is this thing here, where you can actually have a variable time frame here on the ultrasound barrier. So the ultrasound barrier, as you guys know, is that barrier that the gas price needs to be at for ETH to be deflationary for us to be burning more ETH than we're issuing per slot here, per block. And you can actually change the time frame up here, so I can go to 7 days, and then I can go to 30 days, and 1 day, and whatever, and you can see it on my screen. So everything in orange is ultrasound, everything in blue is not ultrasound. So over the last 30 days, it's been pretty good. And look how high we went, on the above the ultrasound barrier, and we don't go very much below it, which is very, very cool. I mean, we're at 11 Gwei right now. The barrier is 15.4 Gwei. I mean, that's not very low. And and we're still burning ETH, even if we're under that barrier, which I think is obviously very important as well. But yeah, guys, like this website, Ultrasound.money, has become just such an amazing resource. I mean, I remember when we were tracking these sorts of things, all these sorts of things. Like, it's not just the burn, but it's got everything to do with ETH as an asset, ETH's issuance, comparing it to different things. I remember this was all completely scattered around. Then we got the Ultrasound.money meme. Then Justin Drake said, like, let's build the website, and got a team together, and they built it, and they got the bat signal. I mean, it really has come such an amazingly long way, and I love this website. I visit it probably every day at this point, because I like keeping track of the supply chain since merge. I want to see this get to like 0% since merge, because I just think that'd be a cool milestone. But yeah, anyway, kudos to the Ultrasound.money team for putting out these updates. Very cool to see that. Next up here is a great thread, which I'm not going to read, but you can go read, from Proto Lambda, discussing the blob terminology that I was talking about before. But he doesn't just discuss that. He goes through a whole history of sharding on Ethereum. Now, for those of you who don't know the history, this is the thread to read. Honestly, I even learned some stuff from this, and I know the history. So you should go give this thread a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but it's highly recommended, definitely, if you want to learn the history of sharding. Speaking of MEV, censorship resistance, all that good stuff there, Marius from the Geth team put together a blog post on Ethereum's biggest issue that no one's talking about with regards to MEV, PBS, light clients, and private order flow. This is a short blog post, but I definitely recommend giving it a read to get further context around MEV and censorship resistance, and how there's differences between public order flow and private order flow, and how that affects all of that. I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to give a read. Barnaby here from the Robust Incentives Group at the Ethereum Foundation announced that on the 21st, so 3 days ago now, the launch of a Rig Open Problems, which is abbreviated as ROPS, a collection of problem prompts that they're looking to solve with anyone who wants to tackle them. So they being the Robust Incentive Group, the prompts come with some questions to answer, but could lead to more open-ended explorations. And you can check out this resource here for some of the questions, and if you want to get involved here. This is a pretty good place to, I guess, be and get involved with if you're interested in Ethereum research problems and some of the deepest problems, some of the deepest research within Ethereum. So I definitely recommend checking this out if that sounds like something you want to do. I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, we have an update here from the rated.network website. So they've basically overhauled their entire website from what I can see. If I go to the page here, yeah, so they've overhauled the entire website here on rated.network, which I've shown before, which basically tracks all the different staking services and stats around them, and it looks much better now. I think I love the view here. You can see here the staking entities such as Lido, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, and then you can see the network penetration, the consensus client distribution. So it's looking pretty healthy there, right? And then you can also see block space distribution, which is really cool. So you can see which relays they're talking to, and if how much vanilla blocks they're proposing. So let's take Lido for example. You can see here 47% of Lido's blocks are going through flashbots, right? Block space is distributed through flashbots, whereas 35% is vanilla blocks, which means they're just vanilla validators. And then you have a few more relays here as well, like Blocks Route, Manifold, Block Native, and Eden. And then, as I said before, Coinbase isn't actually using any MEV boost relay right now, as far as we can tell. And that's this kind of like vanilla blocks at 100% here under Coinbase. So that's what I was talking about before, where I said we can't be certain that Coinbase isn't censoring anything on their end with their validators, but we can be certain that they're not actually pushing anything through any censoring MEV relays, at least right now. They could be in the future. Whereas other exchanges other exchanges that are running staking services such as Kraken and Binance are. So Kraken's 43% flashbots, Binance is 52%, but Kraken has over half of their blocks going through vanilla blocks, and Binance at about 43%. But anyway, you should go check out this resource. It's really great. This is just one thing that they're tracking. They're also tracking things like deposit addresses here, so you can see which deposit addresses are the leading ones, and their network penetration and consensus client distribution and block space distribution. And then there'll be more stuff here that's being teased on the left that's grayed out right now to track a bunch of different things around the Ethereum beacon chain. So definitely go check that out and check out the blog post for a more detailed explanation of that. All right, that's all for core dev updates. Onto a layer 2 update from Arbitrum. So Arbitrum announced that Binance US now supports deposits and withdrawals from the Arbitrum 1 network. This is really cool because the US users can't actually use a vanilla Binance. They barred them quite a while ago, but they also spun up Binance US because they obviously don't want to lose that market share. So now if you are an Arbitrum 1 user and you want to be able to bridge in and out of it without going through Ethereum layer 1 or through a mainnet, you can now do that with the Binance US exchange. So very cool to see this. Congrats to Arbitrum on landing this. It's going to lead to more growth for Arbitrum, I bet. All right, so if you've been waiting for a while for the GridPlus Lattice1s to come back in stock, well, they've been fully restocked, and now you can go get one at gridplus.io. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Lattice1 is, it is a hardware wallet, but it's not your usual hardware wallet. It is the best hardware wallet in the game, and no, I am not paid to say that. The reason why it is the best is because the amount of security that they've packed into this thing is absolutely insane. Ledger is like a small little device, which is fine, right? I've used Ledger in the past. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the GridPlus Lattice1 goes to the next level. It definitely gives you much more to play with. It's got this concept of a safeguard where you can have these cards which act as like a backup and act as a way to kind of like not just backup, or like use different grid pluses with that card, use different Lattice1s with that card, I should say. It's also got it's also a much bigger device with a full-fledged screen here, full-fledged touchscreen, which you can see it shows things like the entire detailed Ethereum transaction, so there's no need for you to blind sign like you do on a Ledger device because you've only got that small screen there, and so many other features here that I would be talking about this for ages if I kept going on about it, and I've already shilled enough here, so I'm not going to continue. But yeah, if you are looking for a Lattice1, you should definitely go check it out. They're now restocked. You can now add them to the cart, buy it, do all that good stuff. I'll leave a link in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, so Johnny from Element Finance is teased over the weekend what they're currently focusing on. So they're focusing on something called Hyperdrive, with a real name of that pending, Council Protocol, which is Governance 3.0 for Element Finance, and decentralized front end, a decentralized front end, and that's a code name pending. So there is a brief explanation of what each of these things are in this thread, which I'll link in the YouTube description below, of course. But essentially, what Hyperdrive is that it's a code name for their new AMM research featuring no terms for LPs, just set and forget it, profitable LPing without perverse incentives, ability to short/long fixed rates, and the greatest SDK ever. The Council Protocol, self-explanatory, it's a new governance framework, and a decentralized front end, again, self-explanatory, but as Johnny says here, we're in the early development stages of a new type of decentralized front end that can provide a rich user experience without a back-end server. The plan is to give this to the community so we can all work to improve it together. More details soon. So a lot of really cool things being cooked up at Element Finance. I'll link the thread in the YouTube description for you to check out below. And now moving on to an update from Empiric. So they just published a new educational guide explaining smart contract events on StarkNet and how to leverage them to trustlessly verify Empiric's data feed. So for those of you who don't know, Empiric is trying to bring decentralized and composable data to the StarkNet ecosystem. In plain terms, that means things like oracles, right? Like building oracles to get outside external data, bring it into the StarkNet ecosystem for DeFi projects to take advantage of. And yeah, they're a newer protocol. They're definitely building a lot of really cool stuff. And you should definitely check out their educational guide explaining things here, more probably on the developer side of things. But if you're interested in this sort of stuff, you can check it out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Next up here, we have a thread from Seb from Zapper Farecaster. So Seb said, Zapper will be taking more and more of a social spin with time, partially inspired by Farecaster. Wanted to share my thoughts on how I think Web3 social will look like. And of course, I'll link this thread for you to check out. I wanted to make a few comments about this. So I got access to Farecaster over the weekend. It's basically an Ethereum-based decentralized alternative to Twitter. It works really well. Like, I've only put one cast, I think they call them casts out on there so far. I just said hello world, but there is a pretty vibrant ecosystem on there already. It is still invite only, so I guess like that's why the ecosystem is pretty vibrant and pretty chill, because it's not just like a free-for-all. But I think that between Farecaster and Lens and a bunch of other things that are being worked on in the decentralized social media space, I think we're actually going to get to a point where we get something that can actually compete with Twitter. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The power of Twitter is the network, right? The network, the social graph. But what happens when we collapse that to the point where the social graph can be taken with you anywhere, to any front end, to any service? Like, you don't have to lose your social graph if you change services. I think that's incredibly powerful. Now, obviously, is there going to be interoperability between Farecaster and Lens? I don't know. Maybe there will be, maybe there won't be. But if it's all based on an Ethereum wallet, for example, or an Ethereum address, then the services themselves don't have to do anything else. They can just pull data from and pull the social graph from the Ethereum address and store that all on chain, right? And then the user can port that between different social experiences, whether that be a Farecaster or a Lens or even a Zapper, right, for example. So I think we're going to get to a point. I've been skeptical of decentralized social media in the past, but I'm starting to see it come together. I definitely am. I'm starting to see more people get excited about it too, which is always good. And as I said, those switching costs are the main barrier to entry. But once we iron those out and once we make it so that people are, I guess, incentivized to switch, it's a better experience, I think we're going to get there. I do think so. I had more faith than ever that we're going to get there, than I've ever had before that we're going to get there, but it's still going to be a while away. Obviously, we still need to scale and things like that, and to make something fully decentralized, there would need to be a DAO attached, all that sorts of stuff, right? It's not going to happen anytime soon, but I'm seeing the pieces come together, that's for sure. But yeah, definitely give Seb's thread a read here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Oh, and finally here we have something from Socket today. So not today, a couple days ago, they've introduced something called SocketScan.io, which is the first multi-chain explorer. Now, for those of you who don't know what Socket is, it's basically a platform to power truly multi-chain apps. So they have a bridge protocol. They have a protocol which aggregates all the bridges from things like a cross bridge to hyphen bridge to hop bridge to all the bridges, right? They aggregate that, and now using the Socket Explorer, you can basically explore all of these bridge transactions by searching the transaction hash here. So as it says here, track all your bridge transactions across Ethereum, BNB chain, Polygon, Avalanche, Gnosis chain, Phantom, Optimism, Arbitrum, and Aurora, and any future networks that Socket decides to support here. So very cool to see this. I think this is obviously going to be very good for users. A lot of users tend to kind of go into supports of the Telegram, but like, where's my money? I don't know where it's gone, because they can't actually see it once it's in the bridge. They haven't got visibility over it. Well, this is going towards fixing that, or at least rectifying that, and preventing a lot of those, where's my money questions ending up in a Discord channel. So yeah. But anyway, I think that's it. So got through it all in 30 minutes. Lost my voice almost there, but kind of just fire of information. But as usual, everything's linked in the YouTube description for you to go check out. But that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.